Now or never, Israel's choice on Iran. Should Israel act alone? The clock is ticking, not months, not even weeks. Today we stand on the edge of history again. What are the stakes? The survival of Israel as we know it. Because a nuclear Iran is not just about Tehran. It's about Beirut, Baghdad, Sana'a, and Gaza. It's about a future where Israel has to weigh a nuclear response to a proxy firing rockets across our borders. A future where Jewish life is once again put in existential danger because we didn't believe our enemies when they told us exactly what they planned to do. We've been there before, October 7th. Before that, the Holocaust. Never again must mean never again. Welcome to True East. Before we dive in, I want to share something with you that's very personal. My new book, When the Stones Speak, the remarkable discovery of the City of David and what Israel's enemies don't want you to know, is about the City of David and the most important archaeological discoveries in modern Israeli history and the battle that erupted when Israel's enemies discovered that we were unearthing the actual proof and evidence that the Jewish people are indigenous to the land of Israel. They resorted to violence, to intimidation, to taking us to law courts. This included extreme left-wing NGOs. This included the Muslim Brotherhood. They used even the State Department and at one point the White House, all in an attempt to try to shut us down so that you would not know the story and the world would not know the story of the ancient stones that prove that the Jewish people are indigenous to Israel. Now more than ever, this is an important story to be told. Please, if you're interested, buy yourself a copy today on Amazon.com. Pre-order it. This is the fourth largest publisher in the world. We need to support them and drive an unapologetic pro-Israel book that proves that the Jewish people are in their ancestral land to the number one in the charts. Thank you. Today, I had the pleasure of hosting the National Security Panel at the JNS National Summit. It was a fascinating panel, and I decided to dive in with the key question for our participants. Our participants included General Norkin, who was the Israel Air Force commander, who operated the Air Force up until 2 years ago. It included current Brigadier General Amir Avivi. It included Sarit Zehavi, a lieutenant colonel, and Yaakov Lapin, who is JNS's foreign correspondent and international military affairs correspondent. Here I am today at the JNS Summit. It's incredible to see hundreds and hundreds of people. It's so packed that the doors, they're not allowing anybody in the doors. Everyone's calling everyone to try to get in. They've had an incredible lineup of speakers today. Everyone from the Prime Minister. Shortly, we're going to be hearing from Governor Huckabee, who is now Ambassador Huckabee, the United States Ambassador to Israel, from Mark Levin, and many incredible people. The question that I put in front of my panelists was as followed. We know that on Saturday, the United States and Iran concluded the third round of their nuclear talks about the future of Iran's nuclear program. While we don't have anything definitive, what we do know is both sides said that there was progress. In fact, just yesterday on Sunday, President Trump himself said that he thinks that there's going to be a deal with Iran. We also know that President Trump confirmed that 2 weeks ago, Israel was ready to carry out an airstrike against Iran, and that President Trump, he said that he didn't tell Israel not to do it, but he made it uncomfortable for Israel to do it, meaning he asked Israel not to carry out the strike to give diplomacy a chance. Another major development was on Saturday. Iran suffered the largest explosion of its southern port, a port used by the Iranian National Committee, by Iranian terrorists, the IRGC. This was a massive explosion which sent sodium perchlorate into the atmosphere. Now that chemical, sodium perchlorate, is used really only for one thing. It's used as solid fuel to power ballistic missiles that are fired at Israel. And in fact, the last barrage of missiles that came towards Israel in October and the one before it in April 2024 were powered by that solid fuel, which shows us it was delivered by a ship that left China, arrived in the southern port in Iran during the month of March, which shows that despite Israel's fantastic aerial strike against Iran, Iran is rebuilding and interested in rebuilding its missiles and its atomic abilities. On one hand, we have the Trump administration, which is trying to engage in diplomacy. The president has said that if diplomacy doesn't work, then there will be all hell to pay. And on the other hand, we know that Iran is planning right now to enrich their uranium. My question to the panelists was as follows. Imagine that you are Israel's Minister of Defense. The United States and Iran have concluded a deal. You receive intelligence that Iran is continuing to enrich uranium, is going from 60% to 90%, which according to scientists could take around 2 weeks. Do you rely on the deal and encourage Israel to restrain, or do you go for an attack, even if that is a unilateral attack? That was the main case that I presented today, and we had some fantastic people. Major General Norkin, who, as I mentioned, was the general of the Air Force, he really cautioned 2 things. He said, first of all, if diplomacy works and Israel doesn't have to go to war, then that's an option. But he said very clearly, Israel cannot tolerate a nuclear Iran, and that if diplomacy does not work, Israel always has to stand up for itself. And he said that Israel, in fact, has been tested and carried out its abilities. Israel has struck Lebanon. Even yesterday, we struck Lebanon in the middle of Dakhia, which is a civilian suburb of Iran in which the Hezbollah has been embedding themselves in this civilian area for decades. Israel struck a major weapon supply center. By the way, when Israel strikes, Israel does something first and no other army in the world does. Israel created something called a knock on the roof. Israel sent at first a low explosive rocket that landed on the roof of one of the buildings. You can see this online. All of the residents of Dakhia ran out of the way. Before Israel struck that building, it gave time for the residents to move out of the way and then took down that building in the middle of a crowded Lebanese suburb. You can see the building come down and all the other civilian buildings around it intact. That, he says, shows that Israel is willing to strike and is able to. Not to mention, Israel's most recent strike on Iran left Iranian airspace defenseless. For years, Iran had received anti-missile S-300 batteries that, according to the world, would take down the Israeli Air Force. In Israel's last attack, it eliminated all of the S-300s. Maybe there's one left. Iranian airspace is standing wide open. In fact, that leads us to the next question, which is, there has never been a time in history that Israel had open skies over Iran and was so able to carry out an attack. It is important to note that General Norkin is one of the few people on Earth that actually planned and carried out an attack on a nuclear facility. He led the 2007 aerial strike called Project Out of the Box, in which the Israeli Air Force eliminated a nuclear reactor in Syria. So he knows what it is to carry out that strike. And he said at that time that when Israel looks back, it will understand that the decision to take out the nuclear reactor in Syria was one of the most important decisions Israel ever made. I have a question. If Israel does not take out Iran and Iran breaks away and creates a bomb, will we look back and say that this was one of the worst strategic decisions Israel has ever made in the last 77 years? That's an especially important question this week, because this week is Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel Independence Day, the 77th anniversary celebration since 1948, when Israel became a state. And it's a time to reflect and ask ourselves, what is the population of Israel going to be thinking about when Israel has its 150th birthday? Just around 73 years off in the future. They're going to be looking at this moment in time when the world regional power known as Iran, its skies are open. It says it wants to create a bomb. It says it wants to destroy Israel. What we do now will be looked at in the future. The next person that spoke on the panel was Sarit Zehavi. Sarit Zehavi created a center called Alma. Sarit Zehavi moved to northern Israel. She's a lieutenant colonel, where she has been studying and examining Lebanon and Hezbollah for years. Her information is all gleaned from public sources in Arabic, in Persian, and in fact, they are so thorough that they share this information with the Israeli intelligence community. There is almost no one in this country that knows what it is to fight an Iranian proxy more than Sarit Zehavi. She lives on that northern border. She's just a couple miles from that northern border. She knows when those missiles and rockets have hit her home from Hezbollah. She knows what it is for her children to be in shelters. When I said to her, "How are you today?" she said, "I'm happy that I haven't been in a shelter in the last few days." She knows what this is. Sarit Zehavi had a different take. When it came to diplomacy, Sarit Zehavi said it's not at all about looking at diplomacy and understanding if Iran is going to be able to enrich from 60 to 90%. Because if, let's just say that Iran decides now not to enrich uranium and decides not to go for the bomb, she said, what's going to happen tomorrow or in 4 years when there's a different United States government, perhaps a government that is less favorable to us than the Trump government, which is the most favorable government probably in the history of the United States, at least for the last 100 years. It will take Iran 2 weeks to be able to go from 60% enrichment to 90% enrichment, and we may not have that same opportunity to strike now. She said unequivocally, there is no place for any diplomatic solution at all. Israel and the United States, she said, Israel should not be doing this alone. Iran is an enemy of the entire Western world. Israel and the United States both need to jointly go after Iran. The other person that we spoke to was Yaakov Lapin. Yaakov Lapin is the JNS military correspondent, and he was very clear because he was responding to something that General Norkin had said before. General Norkin had said that if Israel's going to strike Iran, Israel has to know that it's not just about striking Iran. This is going to launch an entire war. At which point, I actually turned to one of the panelists and I said, I thought we were already at war. And he said, we are at war. And here Yaakov Lapin said, listen, we were originally incredibly fearful of Hezbollah's response, of Iran's response, of them launching 150,000 missiles and rockets at Israel. Well, they tried. And with the blessing of God and Israeli technology and help from the United States, we were protected by the aerial umbrella and the technology and the investment that we've made. We know what it is if Iran or if Hezbollah shoots rockets or missiles. Israel knows what this war is like. It's not a war that is going to bury Israel. This is a war that Israel will need to fight. But in order to attack Iran, and Yaakov Lapin was also very, very clear, understanding that this is the time to attack Iran might in fact create an uptick from Hezbollah, from the Houthis. But this is not much different than what we've been facing. And the opportunity to strike Iran right now is key. The other person that was interviewed was Amir Avivi. Amir Avivi created something called the Bitronistim, which is also known as the Israeli Security Council, which is an incredible organization from generals down to captains, which is geared to present a conservative fighting view from an Israeli electorate. Not just, we often hear about Israelis who don't want to be in the reserves. There was really no alternative. So all Amir did was he began an organization saying, we are those who believe in the state of Israel, called the Bitronistim. If you believe in the state of Israel and you're never not going to show up for reserve duty, join us. That's the organization he created. He's also a general in the IDF. Amir warned very, very clearly. He said that the only solution that could possibly be a solution would be if the United States would put boots on the ground, or Israel, inside Iran and literally take apart their entire nuclear program. Completely destroy it down to the bedrock. If that would happen, then perhaps Israel doesn't need to strike Iran, Israel, and the United States. But barring that eventuality, there is no choice but for Israel to eliminate the threat that stands in front of us, even if Israel has to act alone, because we know both Israel's attack on Iraq in 1981 with the Iraq reactor, which destroyed Iraq's nuclear program, which can we only imagine if it hadn't been destroyed during the 1991 Second Gulf War. Then instead of Iraq sending ballistic missiles, they could have sent nuclear missiles. And also the 2007 attack on the Syrian reactor. Both of those were carried out by Israel unilaterally alone. And Amir was very, very clear in saying, we have an Israel, we know how to defend ourselves, we will fight with whatever we have. We will not allow there to be a nuclear Iran. It is either boots on the ground, taking it down to the very bedrock and removing it, or Israel striking. And here Yaakov Lapin said something very, very important. The idea of boots on the ground, just to put this in perspective, I did some research. Iran is roughly the size of Alaska. Alaska is the equivalent of 19 states in the United States. This is not Israel, which is the size of New Jersey, which is barely something that can be seen on the map. When you open up a map of the Middle East, Iran is a massive, massive country. Can we imagine U.S. forces, along with Israeli forces, scouring all of Iran, trying to uncover the nuclear program? It doesn't seem to be very realistic at that time. This is a time that history is watching what Israel does. It is these very moments when Israel has a strong military. We have a United States partner in line that even if Israel has to go it alone, this partner understands and appreciates, empathizes with the Israeli values and doesn't want there to be an Iran. A key question is, why is the United States trying to negotiate and not just trying to take out Iran? And here, there's a few possible answers. One is that the United States does not want to be drawn into a diplomatic crisis that, in fact, requires American soldiers to put boots on the ground. It's a possibility. President Trump has said from before he came into power, he does not want America to be drawn into any other wars. And therefore, maybe from his perspective, if there's an agreement in which Iran dismantles, then maybe it's a possibility. Here, Israel and the United States may have different priorities and different perspectives. Another reason which I'm thinking is it's pretty clear that the United States sees the enemy on the world stage not as Iran and not as Russia. They are enemies. But the main enemy on the world stage is none other than, you guessed it, China. China is a growing enemy that's infiltrated into the United States. They are carrying out what they call the 100-year marathon, where it's a Chinese concept that goes back thousands of years, where you slowly build and don't show your enemy that you're building amongst them until all of a sudden you release and you've already taken over. That is the Chinese approach. They are playing the long game. And President Trump knows this. And it could very well be that he wants to marginalize Russia, which is why he's dealing with Putin and hoping to move that piece out of the way. He may want to neutralize Iran and move that piece out of the way so that Washington can focus on the global enemy of today and certainly of tomorrow, which is China. I understand the United States perspective. The United States has to carry out what is in its own best interests. However, on the same tone, Israel has to carry out what is in its best interests, which is, at the end of the day, we will be the ones left with a nuclear Iran on our border. Not the United States, not Europe, and not entities that are far around the world. It's on our border. And if Iran is saying it wants to destroy Israel, maybe we should believe them. We know whenever we've not believed our enemies, it has resulted in disaster for the Jewish people. Hitler said he wanted to kill the Jews, and then he carried out an extermination. Yahya Sinwar and Hamas call for the destruction of the Jews, and we have October 7th. Iran has been calling for the destruction of Israel. We could choose to sweep it under the rug and say, oh, they don't really mean it. However, it is in our hands to make sure that on Israel's 150th anniversary, we look back at the people who are living now, each of us, me, you, the people in this room, the people in your home, Jews, non-Jews around the world who are supporting Israel. We are all actors in a drama that will go down in history now, and know that we made the right decision, not only to protect us, but to protect future generations. My name is Doron Spielman. This, again, is the True East Podcast. It was a pleasure for you to join us. This is an incredible conference. I thank JNS, and I thank you for joining. Have a great day, a good week, and happy anniversary to the State of Israel.